happy, and we are so genuinely happy to have here Miss Lisa Morrison to talk about emotional intelligence. And what will be more topical than emotional intelligence? And we are trying to fully understand, and we want Lisa to explain the value you can get from this topic. And she understand that we can leverage emotional intelligence. We can create solutions, and we can make our people, be more effective. So we'll be more than happy to hear more, Lisa, about this topic. And again, really happy to have you here today and to talk us about this amazing topic. Thank you so much.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be invited. Thank you so very much, PMI Greece, and to all your members for inviting me along today. So let me see if technology works. Share my screen. Hopefully everything will be fine. So is that okay? Can you see? Okay, is that
perfectly fine, Lisa? Thank you.
Great. Just to double check, I'm not sure everybody's microphones. Because a little bit of feedback. So I'm not sure if everyone's microphones have been turned off. So if everybody can hear that.
All right.
So, but anyway, let me start. So we are going to be talking about emotional intelligence and great project management, and in particular, what is the relationship between the two? So what we'll be covering in particular today is how to get the best out of yourself and others at work. We're going to look at the latest research into performance and the factors that make people perform at their best. We're going to break down these factors into tangible actions and competencies so you can apply them in any setting to create high engagement. And what's really important is the right environment for high performing teams and individuals. Then we're going to have a really quick look, and it has to, unfortunately, we got just less than an hour today, so we're going to have a bit of a quick look, but enough for you to be able to take something away today, at the role emotional intelligence plays within performance and how we can leverage these skills for highly effective project management. And at the very end of the talk today, we're going to have a little bit of fun, where I'm going to show you something called language and behaviour patterns, so you can begin to develop some of these emotional intelligence skills today, tonight, and communicate with influence. So I'm expecting you to be going home to your husbands, your wives, your partners, and practicing this stuff to see if you can get your own way before you go back to work. So before we do any of that, I think it's really important. What we're talking about here is we want people to perform at the best. We want you to perform at your best, and your role is to get others to perform the tasks you need them to do. So I think it's really important that we take a look at what do we actually mean by performance. So performance is actually the completion of a task with application of knowledge, skills, and abilities to an expected standard. And that's really important. You need to know what is the criteria, what is the level you're trying to do, whatever your skills or your tasks are at, what level are we expected to do that at? We then look at, so in that case, what is performance management? It's a process of ensuring that the set of activities and outputs meets the organisation's goals in an effective and efficient manner. Because when we're at work, we're all trying to perform at our best. And as project managers or as managers, it's our role to help others perform at their best. So we need to manage performance. But then when we compare that to what's the basic definition of project management, that definition is it's the process of leading the work of a team to achieve all project goals within given constraints. So you can see there is a direct link between performance management, and project management. This is about how do we get others to achieve what we need them to do within the given constraints of the project, time, budget, whatever that might be. So now we're clear on what performance is. What do we actually mean? What do all of the academics say? What do the research says? If that's what performance is, how do we achieve performance in business? And what all of the research says is that performance, and I'm going to give you an amalgamate. So a lot of my work that I do a lot of stuff on how to get the best out of yourself and others. And I do an awful lot of performance coaching and training in the performance arena. And so what I'm going to talk you through now is accumulation of all of the best that's out there, all of the best research, including my own, on what is performance and how do we get the best out of ourselves and others. So the first piece of research that I want to show you is the fact there's Bob Solotel. They state that performance is the ability to do something plus motivation to do it and the opportunity to do it. So if we want people to perform at their best, Bob Solotel say, make sure they're able to do it, make sure they're motivated to do it, make sure they get the opportunity to do it. But motivation is such a big topic. So what do we mean by motivation? So by motivation, Pink, for example, is one of my favorite researcher in this area. Pink says that motivation is autonomy plus mastery plus purpose. So being able to have some control over what you do, when you do it, why you do it, how you do it. Having mastery, being able to feel like you're really good at it, plus purpose, knowing, having a reason why you want to do it. Whether that's a yearning to do something for the greater good or for somebody else, or because you've got your own individual reasons of doing it, that perhaps you want to further your career, whatever it might be. Pink says motivation is autonomy plus mastery plus purpose. So what are we really talking about here? Well, actually, what we're talking about is employee engagement. And what all of the research tells us is that if we want high-performing teams, if we want our people to be working at their best, and quite often what's really interesting, as you know, in project management, is that you don't necessarily have a fixed team of people. Sometimes you have a team made up of people from all over the business area and stakeholders from outside of your organization sometimes. So this idea of team and getting them to work well together is really important. But in order to do this really well, what all of this stuff is actually telling us is that we need to understand what the individual's motivation is. And when we do that, what we can do is drive collaborative action towards a shared purpose. And if we get this stuff right, we've got really high employee engagement. When we've got high employee engagement, we've got high performance. But there is a caveat to all of this, because Galway, he states that performance is actually the potential minus interference. And this is really where it gets interesting, because where does that interference come from? Interference on an individual or a team's potential comes quite often from the environment that they're in. So we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail. So when we then look at what does that environment look like, some of the most pioneering research in this area actually comes from Gallup. And what they did, they did a massive piece of research from thousands of people all over the world. And they discovered, they were able to identify a few aspects of the employee experience that exist disproportionately on the highest performing teams. And these 8 statements are those very aspects of the employee experience. And what Gallup actually asked everybody to do was to score themselves against these 8 statements, from 1 to that they strongly disagree with them, right the way through to 5 that they strongly agree with them. So let's take a bit of a closer look at what these statements actually mean. They're actually split up into the best of we. So if you look, we've got number 1, I am really enthusiastic about the mission of my company. Statement 3, in my team, I'm surrounded by people who share my values. Statement number 4, my teammates have my back. And statement number 7, I have great confidence in my company's future. So actually what these statements are showing us is these deal with a person's experience created in their interactions with others on the team, or in other words, the communal experience of work. This is what we share as a team or what we share as a company. What this research is telling us actually is that the most important experience at work is the experience of team. Now let's just backtrack a minute. What we're talking about here is how to get the best out of ourselves and others. And all the research is telling us that actually how we perform as a team, whether that's the team that we're in every day, or whether it's a team that we're put together in because we're all doing tasks on a project, is critical to how well we perform on that particular task or project or whatever it might be. So let's take a look at the other statements. These statements are called the best of I, or the best of me. So statement number 2, at work, I clearly understand what's expected of me. Statement number 4, I have the chance to use my strengths every day at work. Statement number 6, I know I'll be recognised for excellent work. And statement number 7, in work, I'm always challenged to grow. So in other words, these statements all deal with the individual experience of work. This is about what is unique about me, what is valuable about me. Do I feel challenged to grow? So in other words, what this is telling us is that the biggest decision a company makes is who they appoint as managers, whether that be your line manager or whether that be you as a project manager. All the research is now coming together to tell us something really, really important. It's telling us that how we interact with those around us, our experience, the best of we, how we feel about being part of a team is critical to our performance. It's also telling us, because of the best of I, that our relationship with our managers are critical. Do we feel valued? Do we feel challenged to grow? That relationship we have with our managers and our project managers are critical to our performance. So this is all beginning to shape up now to look at a particular picture that we're going to go into in a little bit more detail shortly. But there is just one other very special thing that I want to draw your attention to, because this research also found out something really interesting. And they called it the killer question. And this is the single most powerful predictor of team performance and employee engagement. I have the chance to use my strengths every day at work. This one statement, when individuals score high against this particular statement, is a really, really important and powerful predictor of how well they're performing as a team and how engaged they are as an employee. And what's particularly interesting about that is, for example, sometimes when we are asking others elsewhere in the business, and perhaps people we've never worked with before, to do tasks on our project, sometimes they feel like we're throwing them in the deep end. And to give you an egg, because perhaps we're asking them to do something they've never done before, perhaps they don't have the time to do it. So a way in which I explain that sometimes is I'd like you all to imagine that tomorrow morning, you all have to take part in a decathlon competition. We're all going to meet and you're all going to take part in this decathlon competition. And I guess what I want to know is just for you to think that through. These are the kind of questions that you'll probably have. For example, if somebody was to say that to me, I would be devastated. I'm so unfit. I've never took part in an exercise like that before. Wouldn't have a clue what to do. I'd need to know what standard, what do you require of me? What are the expectations? Is it just taking part that matters? Do I have to win? Do I have to break records? How good would I be at it? Because what we've already learned is we've already looked at performance. You need mastery. So what happens if you're not very good at a task and you've been asked to do it? Actually, chances are, if you don't feel like you're very good at it, if you don't feel competent at it, it's going to knock your confidence. If your confidence is knocked, you're not going to want to take part in the task. You're going to perhaps withdraw. But there's a lot of, if we bring together all of that other stuff that we talked about before, purpose, for example, why would you want to do it? For me, I wouldn't want to do it at all. I would be devastated to be asked to do something like that. But perhaps some of you are out there would be thinking, fantastic, I love things like that. I'd be really up for the challenge. And what's really interesting is when we ask somebody to do a task, if we just throw them in the deep end, if we just say, I need you to do this and I need you to do it by then, without considering any of these type of things that we often need to feel comfortable, insecure, to feel motivated, have we given them the autonomy to do it? All of those things, for example, that the research tells us, quite often, when we're given a project, we are a little bit tunnel visioned as project managers sometimes. We just think about our own constraints. When do I have to get it done by? Who do I need to involve? Who has to do what? What's the budget? Making sure you hit milestones. And then quite often we're delegating tasks to a range of people. Sometimes we know those people, sometimes we know them really well, sometimes we don't know them at all. And what sometimes we do is we don't consider some of the really important questions that all of the research is telling us we need to consider if we want people to perform at their best. We just delegate the task, tell them what they have to do, when they have to do it by, and we expect that to happen sometimes. But all the research is telling us if we do that, actually, for some people, we'll be doing the opposite of getting the best out of them. We'll be making them perform at their worst. Just like, for example, if somebody asked me to do a decathlon tomorrow, I would be terrible. I would probably find some reason to not take part, or I'd be anxious about it all night. It's really important that what we do is we consider these words that are often bandied about soft skills. That it's not just task driven, it's not just technical driven, it's we think about these things that we call soft skills. How do we get the best out of other people? And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this session. But interestingly, some of you may be already aware that we've completely changed the name. It's really making its way across the globe now. People don't talk about soft skills anymore. We're calling them power skills, because we've got our technical skills and our technical abilities, and the way we power up those technical skills is by using what we normally call soft skills. And that's where emotional intelligence comes in. So we're going to move on to that shortly. So she says, as I'm trying to get for some reason, there we go. Sorry, apologies, the mouse went there. So when we look at all of that research, we can put this together into a performance framework. And when I do a lot of training and coaching and consultancy, I go into a lot of businesses, and we use this framework as the starting point to go, all of the research tells us that these are the type of things that we have to look at if we want to get the best out of ourselves and others. And I'm going to go into detail in some of these things in a moment. But you'll see ability, purpose, mastery, opportunity, autonomy. This is bringing all together that fantastic research all into one place. But what's really interesting is the things that I've highlighted in red, these all come from interactions with people. This is all to do with relationships with people. And so this is where, when we're talking about soft skills or power skills, these things, if we look on here, the majority of things in here are not to do with our technical skills. They're not to do with our knowledge, our experience, our technical ability. You can see that's on there. Ability, if we look at that section, for example, having the right skills, the right knowledge, the right talent, the right tools to perform the role is really, really important. But the bigger picture, the most important thing than to get ourselves and others to be at our best is actually much more important. It's much bigger than just our technical skills and our ability. It's all about why we do things. It's about our motivation. It's about how we feel. It's about our relationships. So that is why this kind of stuff, these power skills, are absolutely critical if we want to get the best out of ourselves and others, if we want to be great project managers, if we want to lead others to do the tasks that we need them to do. So what are these keys to success? What are the ways we can take all of that stuff, all of that research, that performance framework? What are the keys to putting that in place and making it really, really successful? Well, first key is emotional intelligence. The top predictor of an employee's success is emotional intelligence. All the research, everywhere we do research all over the world, comes out again and again with the same answers. About 90% of top performers are also high in emotional intelligence. And it's no coincidence that on the flip side, just 20% of bottom performers are also high in emotional intelligence. So we know that's critical. The second key to success is our managers, perhaps the most important factor in your company's success, because the relationship employees have with their manager has the most influence over performance, and also retention and stress levels and growth. And when we look at that in more detail, what we realize is that the impact on performance is directly linked to the manager or the project manager's self-awareness, their self-management skills, their social awareness skills, and their relationship management skills, or in other words, as we're about to discover, emotional intelligence skills. The ability for managers to get the best out of themselves and others is absolutely critical to success in performance. And the third key, and by no means least, is the environment in which we work in, because even the highest quality seeds will not grow without nutritious soil, water and sunlight. So in other words, organisations need fertile soil that will enable and nurture growth. Now, the two very critical aspects of this are really important and often overlooked. What we need is the absolute basics for employees to be satisfied. Satisfied alone will not make them motivated, it will not make them perform. This is ensuring that we avoid dissatisfaction. This only actually gives us a platform for motivation, but it's not motivation in itself. And these basics are the relationships that we have with our supervisors or peers, how we feel about our status at work, securities, of the salary we earn, the work conditions, the quality of our supervision, policies, those very, very basic things. What we're looking for is to avoid dissatisfaction. Satisfaction alone will not give us motivation, will not give us performance. But notice, relationships are just a basic. But once we've got that platform, that's when we can literally create that, we can set up everything we need for growth and motivation and performance. So this is where these higher level things come in. This is about having great leadership, having a shared vision, having a really good and shared mission and purpose, what the culture of your organization's like. And kind of a quick way to describe it all is a very supportive win-win-win approach to work. And by that, what I mean is open and transparent. Our company will do great if we look after you and we look after our customers. If we look after you, you look after our customers. If our customers are looked after, that will look after our organisation. So what we're looking for is a win-win-win approach to work. We want to be open and transparent that everything we do is for joint success for all of us, not just for the benefits of our company, not just for the benefit of the customers, but for the benefit of us all. And when we take that open approach to win-win-win at work, it works wonders. That's where we get a great platform for motivation. That's where all the other stuff I talked about in the performance framework, that's how we achieve those things, because we're really, really looking to make sure we're meeting everybody's needs, not just the needs of the business. So let's take a closer look then at emotional intelligence. So it's important to know that actually emotions can drive our behaviour and impact people both positively and negatively. And it's a scientific fact, all the research shows us this, that emotions precede thought. Now, sometimes we're not aware of how we feel, we just react in the moment. But when emotions run high, they actually physically change the way our brains function, which means it diminishes our cognitive abilities, our decision-making powers, and even our interpersonal skills. So I'm sure you can all think of a time where perhaps you've been really upset or really frustrated or really angry, and perhaps you behave in a way that isn't the way you would normally behave. Perhaps you were really stressed. That's what happens when emotions are running high. So when our limbic system, the part of our brain that drives our emotions, when that's really highly charged, it tends to you've probably heard the fight or flight scenario, that our brains are actually designed to avoid pain or unpleasantness and to seek reward and to seek things that are nice and pleasant. So when that limbic part of our brain kicks in, actually our prefrontal cortex that makes all our logical, rational decisions kind of goes out the window. And that's why we behave sometimes in ways or that we don't behave normally, or that's why the skills we have, perhaps our skills to speak, to diffuse conflict, or to keep our cool, or keep calm in stressful situations. That's why it sometimes goes out of the window. So having emotional intelligence, being able to understand our emotions and manage our emotions, actually helps us be more successful in both our personal and our professional lives. It's not just about these power skills at work. And the thing is, emotional intelligence really matters, because what we also know is that when we cultivate emotional intelligence, when we learn and develop our emotional intelligence skills, actually it helps us realize a more fulfilled and happy life. it actually improves our emotional well-being, which improves our physical well-being. So this stuff is so important in so many areas of our lives. But what's really important in terms of what we're talking about today is that emotional intelligence is the key to having great relationships. We looked at that performance framework before, and we've seen how many of those areas were in red. Those are all of the areas that can only be achieved through knowing ourselves, managing ourselves, and through our interactions with others. So why is that important? Well, that's because great relationships are the key to great performance. So you can see how this is all kind of beginning to make sense as we're forming a really important picture now. We've looked at performance, and when we looked at that in detail, we realised the majority of performance, getting the best out of ourselves and others, all comes down to our emotional intelligence skills and our relationships. So let's take a closer look then at emotional intelligence. So the model that I'm going to use today is one of the latest models that is out there. There's lots of stuff on emotional intelligence. Dan Goleman was actually one of the people that brought emotional intelligence into the populace, if you like. He's the one that brought it into the forefront of leadership and lots of different things. And he's worked with Boyatzis, and they've developed something that they call the emotional and social intelligence competencies. And these 12 competencies literally take all of the work that have been done to date on emotional intelligence, and they've done lots of research all over the globe, and they've come up with these 12 competencies. So you can easily Google these, you can easily find more information on these. And if you're going to study these, obviously I can support you with any, if you need workshops, but if you want to just go away and find something for yourself, this is the model that I would go with because it's fantastic. So what Goleman and Boyatzis actually say is that there are 4 almost like building blocks to emotional intelligence. The first one is self-awareness. This is all about recognizing and understanding our own emotions. All of the research actually says that this is the most important building block out of all of them, because when we get this right, this gives us the platform to build and develop all of these other competencies. So the next competency, so once we recognize and understand our own emotions, the next bit's about self-management. This is effectively managing our own emotions. Once we kind of build on that, so we've got emotional, and I'm going to go into these in a little bit more detail in a moment. The next block, we get that, we begin to work on that. Then the next bit is social awareness. This is now recognizing and understanding the emotions of others, which leads us to the final building block, relationship management, applying our emotional understanding in our dealings with others. And what all the research says is, so there's 12 competencies here, the best leaders, the best people, whether you're a salesperson, a project manager, a leader, a social worker, a carer, the people that you don't need to be, an expert or excellence, showing excellence in all of these competencies, but 6 upwards is brilliant. 6 to 10, up to 10 tends to be, being really, really highly competent in up to about 10 of these 12 areas. We're talking about some of the most emotionally intelligent and the best, most successful performers out there. If you look up the work of Goleman and Boyatzis, in the back of their books and their literature, they publish all of the research, and what they do is they'll actually break down their research into various industries such as finance and manufacturing, and they show you which of the competencies are really prevalent in certain really high performers in certain areas. And you tend to see that it tends to be, around perhaps 8 to 10 are the excellence in 8 to 10 of these areas are the highest performing people in in those industries. So this stuff isn't just, people going, these soft skills are really important. This is hard scientific research that shows us that the people that are at the top of their game, whether it's project management or whatever it might be, the people that are at the top of their game, the people who are the most successful, have 8 to 10 of these competencies really, really finely tuned. So let's take a look at them in a little bit more detail. So in self-awareness, we've got, actually, sorry, I should explain. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through a little bit of detail of each one of them. And just in your own heads or on paper, what I want you to do is I want you to rate yourself on a scale you can see at the bottom of 1 to 5, based on how often do you think, when I read out the statement, how often do you think that statement applies to you? You can do it in your personal life, your work life, you can do it in general, whatever you like. And this actually comes from the Hay Group, who worked with Goleman and Biatsis. This comes from the Emotional and Social Competency Inventory. And it's a full kind of system, like a 360, that enables you to assess your emotional intelligence and social intelligence competencies. But just for fun, just have a think yourselves and decide, give yourselves a score between 1 to 5 for each of the ones that I read out. So the first one, emotional self-awareness, the ability to understand our own emotions and their effects on our performance. So give yourself a score. Would you say you never do this? That'd be a 1. Or you sometimes do it, which might be a 3. Or you consistently do it, which is a 5. Okay, let's look at the next one. So now we're in the self-management building block. This is emotional self-control. This is the ability to keep disruptive emotions and impulses in check and maintain our effectiveness under stressful or hostile conditions. Give yourself a score. The next one is adaptability. So this is flexibility in handling change, juggling multiple demands, and adapting our ideas or approaches. Have a look at your score. The next one is achievement orientation. So do you strive to meet or exceed a standard of excellence? Are you always looking for ways to do things better? Do you set yourself challenging goals and take calculated risks? And the final building block in this one is, do you have a positive outlook? And that's the ability to see the positive in people, situations and events, and our persistence in pursuing goals despite obstacles and setbacks. So in those first building blocks, those first 2 are all about your self-awareness and your self-management. They're all about you. So have a look, see where you think you've got some skills, see where you think you might want to develop, because the more you develop these skills, the better you will be at being a project manager. So once we've got these developed, let's now take a look at the second set, which is all about our relationship with others. How do we interact with others, and how we manage to lead and influence them? So the first building block is empathy. This is the ability to sense others' feelings and perspectives, taking an active interest in their concerns, and picking up cues to what's being felt and thought. So once again, give yourself a score. We've got organisational awareness next. That's the ability to read a group's emotional currents and power relationships, identifying influences, networks and dynamics that might be at play. And if you are doing this, for example, you might want to do this as part of a church group, you might want to do this part in your personal life. Organisational doesn't necessarily mean business and company, although that's kind of the frame in which this is set. It can just mean the community of which that you are within. So that's the social awareness side, but let's look at the relationship management side. So now let's take a look at influence, the ability to have a positive impact on others, persuading or convincing others to gain their support. The next one is coach and mentor, and this doesn't have to be in a formal setting. This can mean very informally, the ability to foster the long-term learning or development of others by giving feedback and support. We've got conflict management, the ability to help others through emotional or tense situations, tactfully bringing disagreements into the open and finding solutions all can endorse. Teamwork, and we know how important this one is, the ability to work with others towards a shared goal, participating actively, sharing responsibility and rewards, and contributing to the capability of the team. And finally, we've got inspirational leadership, and you do not have to be in a management or a leadership role to be able to display this competency, because this is just about the ability to inspire and guide individuals and groups to get the job done and bring the best out of others. So once again, take a look at your scores. It might be really interesting for you to really work on developing these areas to be able to, what are your strengths? How can you build on those strengths? and what areas might you want to pay a little bit more attention to. So what perhaps is really interesting, I just want to draw a little, we could spend time on any of these building blocks, but I just want to draw a little bit of attention to influence, because it's such an important part of project management. Because what we do know is that managers who are equipped with the emotional self-awareness and self-control to manage themselves whilst being adaptable, positive and empathetic actually can express their ideas in a way that really appeal to others. And that's what we're looking for when we want to influence people, when perhaps we want others to do tasks, because the project that we're working on, the success of that project often depends on other people doing tasks. So when we take a little bit of a closer look at influence, this is the social competency side of emotional intelligence, the ability to have a positive impact on others, to persuade them to gain their support. This is quite often in project management, it's really important. We need it to execute on the tasks at hand. It's completely necessary for management and leadership. And as we know, leadership isn't about a role, it's about the art of getting work done well through other people. And that's what we do as project managers. So relationships have the biggest impact on the ability to influence people. So when we do create great relationships, the things I mentioned before about, being adaptable and self-control and having empathy, what we're creating is we're creating trust with these relationships. We're creating trusted relationships. And what we do know is that trust is a precondition of influence. So it's all about building relationships and building trust. So first, it's about building a connection where the people are open to hearing what we have to say. And success when it comes to influence comes down to whether or not you can connect with people's understanding of what matters. Can you see their perspective? And can you use that insight to communicate effectively? You can see where all of the other building blocks of emotional intelligence are beginning to come into play here now. So once again, if you were going to look a little bit more detail at the influence competency in particular, and score yourself once again, this is about having a positive impact on others. People who demonstrate this competency persuade others or convince others to gain support for an agenda or to get them to do a task. So if you were to go on to look into the Goleman and Biatz's model a little bit more detail, they will tell you that some of the indicators of being really skilled in this competency area are: can you convince others by getting support from key people? Can you convince others by using multiple approaches, by appealing to others' self-interest? Can you anticipate how others will respond when you're trying to convince them? Can you convince others by developing behind-the-scenes support? And can you convince others through discussion? Are you able to just have an open and honest discussion? These are the kind of building blocks that make your job, make you really good at your job, but it all is down to your power skills. It's all down to your emotional intelligence skills. It's all down to these individual building blocks in terms of how successful you'll be. So in other words, what we're beginning to learn now is that all of these things, it's all about creating meaningful relationships. And the better we are creating meaningful relationships, then the better project managers we can be. So I've got a very short time left with you now. So what I wanted to do is I want to show you a way in which you can put all of this stuff into action. And normally, I must apologise, normally I'm there with you in person and we would do this exercise together. So I'm going to have to just ask you to kind of do it. Maybe I'm going to ask you some questions and you're going to have to just write it down. I'm going to try and open up the chat box, but if I can't, feel free for the questions I ask you to put them in the chat box, and then you'll at least be able to see each other's answers. So what I'm going to do now is I want to show you something called language and behaviour patterns, because this is going to enable us to take that individual building block of influence and to begin to show you how you can, a particular skill, how you can begin to learn some of those skills to get better at your influence skills. So what I'm going to talk you through, and normally this is a full day training course, so I'm just going to give you a tiny little excerpt for you to take away and start putting into place straight away. I'm going to talk you through something called motivational triggers. These are sets of patterns in a person's language and behaviour that indicates what a person needs to get and stay motivated in a given context. These will trigger a person to do something, or they might prevent them from acting in a certain way. And these patterns will also, if you get them wrong, will demotivate someone. So we'll have a look at the triggers, and then I'm going to show you some influencing language patterns that will enable you to show compassion, avoid conflict, create great rapport, community, collaboration, help you get on the same page as people, help you with your leadership and management skills. So in other words, help you influence the people that you need to get your tasks done, to get them done. So the first one that I want to ask you, and I'm really hoping I'm not sure, what I might have to do is I might have to stop sharing my screen so I can go back to the chat room. So I hope that's okay. I hope you can bear with me. I want you to imagine you're going to buy a used car. And what I want to know is, I want you to think about the question, what would be important to you? What's important to you about buying a used car? Once you've got that answer, either write it down or don't put it in the chat box, just write it down or get it in your head. I want you to ask yourself, why is it important? And then once you've got that answer, why is it important? Whatever that answer is, I want you to ask yourself again, and why is that important to you? So in the chat box, have a think about, you're going to buy a used car, what's important to you? The bit I want to know is, why is it important to you? So let me just try and come out of sharing my screen. If you can stop putting some answers in the chat box. I hope this works. Let me see, show conversation. Great. My goodness, we've got people here from Peru. That is incredible. So let me see. And apologies, I can't speak Greek, but if I come to Greece, if you ever meet you in person, I promise the PMI team I will learn some Greek before I come. So have a think, what's important to you about buying a used car, and why is it important? And I don't know if you're here, Mihail, from Bulgaria. If you did join us, thank you so much for joining us today, because I know we've got people from all over Europe who said they were going to join. So I don't know if it's not working properly. Can anybody see any answers? I don't know if I haven't got anything.
Yeah.
Right, the last, see, I don't have any comments prior to 1743 for some reason.
Right, let me help you with that, Lisa. So we have some different inputs. So we're talking about safety, we're talking about after sales value, we're talking about mechanical condition, traveling, if it has any kind of mechanical malfunctions, cost of maintenance for sure.
I'm just going to interrupt there. So they're the reasons why it's important. So the next bit that I'm really interested in is, why is that important? So for example, if you put mechanical failure, why is mechanical failure important? If you put cost, why is cost important to you? It's really strange. I wonder why I can't see any of these comments. Let me try again.
Let me help you on this navigation. So so we see that people, where they talk about cost because it's a kind of investment, they talk about maintenance because maybe it's second hand and it need to be a good condition and sufficient and efficient use, amusement, reliability, and so people, what I say, I see groups of answers that are quite on the same page, right? So most of the people, they're talking about safety, or I see a member says that because I need it, or they say about cost, evaluation, no money. That's quite clear from my knowledge.
Great, that's perfect. So in that case, if I just share my screen again, if I press the right button, that is that, are we back? Can you see that?
Yeah, we're back.
What's really interesting about this, you see, is it's not about what people's answers are. What this tells us is actually something that we call their motivational direction. And you don't need to know any of the jargon. Some people are motivated away from the things they don't want. So somebody said, cost, because there was one of your answers there, Akios, was about, somebody says sufficient because they want it to be working, because they need it to work. And we've got some answers that are about cost because it's a second-hand car, you don't want it to break down, or mechanical failure because you don't want it to break down. So some people might say things like, I don't want a car that's slow or has a small boot, because what's important to them is they're very clear what they don't want. They're motivated by what they don't want to have happen. Some people are motivated towards the thing they want to have happen. So notice, You could say, I want a fast car with lots of space. They both say exactly the same thing, but the way we process it in our brains is different. And what's really interesting about this, and I'm so sorry, everybody, I couldn't see the chat. If I could, I would have been able to pick up some examples to show you. What this actually means in real life is that some of us, the way our brains work, is we are focused on problems to be avoided. Now, you might recognize that in yourself, or you might recognize that somebody on your project team. So you might hear them come, oh, we need to overcome this problem. We need to solve this before we do that. We can't do this because we need to prevent this happening, or we need to avoid that happening. Or they might talk about, you might ask them what they want, and they might say, well, I don't want another, I don't want the car to break down. What's important to you? Well, it's the mechanical, how many miles is in the clock's really important because I want reliability. Or they might say, because I don't want it to break down. You might hear them talking about what they need to stop doing, what they might be reducing, what they want to reduce. What's really interesting about this is there is no right or wrong answer. It doesn't mean that, that if we process information in this way, it does not mean that we're doing anything wrong. It's just that some people's brains work in this way. And if we are not like that, so for example, if we know exactly what we want to have happen, this can be quite frustrating for us when we're working with people. So for example, you might say to your husband or your wife, would you like to go out for a meal? And they might say yes. And you could say to them, well, what type of food would you like? And they might go, anything, it's up to you. And you might say, should we go for Chinese? And they go, no, I don't fancy that. Okay, shall we go for an Italian? No, I don't want one of those either. Shall we go for an Indian? No, I don't fancy an Indian. And eventually you'll get to what they really want to have happen. Maybe they want to go for English food, let's say. Because for some people, they have to process all of the things that they don't want to have happen before they can get to what they do want to have happen. And when you're working in a team, when you're trying to influence someone, and if perhaps that's not the way you think, if you think as in, I'm really clear, for example, the used car, I want low mileage because I want it to be safe. I want to know exactly what I'm getting. You're very clear what you want, and you're trying to work with someone who processes information like this. It can be really frustrating. But if you want to influence that person, instead of telling them all of the things, perhaps the benefits that, let's say you want to get them to introduce a new process. If you're going, it'll be great if we introduce this process because we'll be able to get faster. We'll be able to do, send out letters faster. We'll be able to, our customers will be happier, etc., etc. That's not necessarily going to appeal to them. You need to say, we need to change the system because if we don't, actually, we're going to end up losing customers. We are going to, you need to talk about all the things that will be avoided. Or it might be, this will stop us from spending lots of money that we don't need to on resending things out. This will solve the problem of getting mail sent back, whatever it might be. What we don't realize is the way we speak to people, and what we know is this happens cross-culturally in every language. The way we speak to people can actually have a massive influence on how easy or difficult it is to create relationships or to influence people. So when we look at the opposite side of the spectrum, people that are very clear about what they do want, they're focused on goals, they're motivated by achievement. The kind of way you'll hear them talk about this is they'll talk about outcomes, objective results, what they want to achieve, what they want to deliver. They'll easily tell you what they want. They talk in a very particular way. It's the opposite to the way we've just talked about. If you've identified that you're a move away, your preference is away from, but you want to, if you're trying to influence someone to change, to do a new process, for example, because if you go in and say, we need this new process, because if we don't, we're going to lose loads of customers, everything's going to get slower, we're just making things more difficult for ourselves. That's not going to necessarily influence these people. You need to go, we need this new process because we're going to get better results, we're going to be faster, the customers are going to be happier. And it's just the way in which we speak differently. And I know some people say to me, this seems very complicated to begin with, but what's really interesting is now that I've mentioned it to you, you're going to notice it in yourself. You're going to notice it in your colleagues. You'll notice it at home. You will notice people will always talk. When you ask them that question, why is that important to you? You'll get a reason that will tell you it's because it's away from what they don't want or towards what they do want. So if you do want to influence someone that has this way of talking, you have to be able to talk about what will gain, the goals, the objectives, the achievements, and the benefits. So I just want to show you one more language pattern very quickly before we take time for questions. So the next one is a really interesting question. What is the relationship between these coins? And I know it seems like a bit of an odd terminology. There's no right or wrong answer. So I'm just going to go straight in and show you, but you have a little think. What's the relationship between these coins? Just imagine what answer you would put down. Just give you a moment there. What do you notice? Because what's really interesting about this one is that this is all about how you prefer to compare new information and deal with change. Some people will notice what's the same about the coins. So you might say they're all round, they're all metal, they're all usable in Europe. But other people will notice that they're all different colours, all different sizes and different values. Once again, there is no right or wrong. This is the way our brains process information. So when we use our self-awareness to recognise what our patterns are, for example, in these areas, there's 12 of them. I'm only going to show you these ones for the purpose of today. When we realise what our own patterns are, then we can begin to recognise the patterns in others. Once we're able to recognise the patterns in others, we can then use our flexibility and our adaptability skills to speak in the way, to kind of use another person's patterns rather than ours to influence them. So let's take a look at this one in more detail. People who maybe only notice what's the same, they tend to like things to be the same. They don't like surprises or change. And what happens as a project manager when you're trying to influence somebody to do a new process or to move to a different side of the building or to, install a new CRM system, for example. When we deal with people who prefer sameness, if you come in going, this is going to be great, it's going to be really different, we're going to be able to do things in loads of new ways, these people will go, no, you will make them feel uncomfortable. You'll know these people because they talk about these kind of things all the time. They talk about that they like things the same, familiar. They'll talk about, that reminds me of this, or we usually do it this way, or we normally do it that way, or that's not the way we do it. Some people just like things to stay the same. But if we're trying to use our influencing skills and we want to get these people to do something a bit different, the last thing you do is talk about the type of language where we talk about something different. We want to bring out the similarities of this project to others. So, for example, we might say, with this, we're going to introduce this process. It's 99% the same as what we already do. It means we're going to be able to do some things a little bit faster. Or, you're going to be sitting with all of the same people. You'll have all of the same things around you. You'll be, you'll be doing the exact same job. Just you'll have a little bit more space, or you'll have better facilities. In the new building, better facilities in the building. You really avoid kind of anything to do with difference. But likewise, if you find you're the kind of person that is you might find yourself having to influence someone that likes difference. And you'll know who they are. You'll see it in their language and behaviour because they like challenge, they like new opportunities. And these people get very demotivated if you give them tasks that are too repetitive. So these people, the ways in which they talk, new ways of working, this is really radical transformation, we'll be able to change this will really make a difference. And quite often people who are involved in change management and project management, quite often we attract these kind of people in our type of work. We like this stuff. But then when we really hit a brick wall, when we then try and get other people who perhaps have been in the same job for a long time, we are trying to get them to do something different. We're excited by difference, but they're not. They dig their heels in. You can't get them to do things. And then we wonder why everything, I don't understand. It's such a great idea. I don't know why I can't get them on board. So if that's you, what you need to do, so if, like I said before, If you prefer difference and you want to bring out, to influence people that prefer similarity, you've got to avoid talking about difference and just talk about similarity. But likewise, if you're the kind of person that likes similarity, you're trying to motivate someone who likes difference, then you emphasize some of the things that are new and different about the project. And that's what it's such a, it might seem like I'm bombarding you with information, but once you read these back, I know it's being recorded, once you have a look at them back, and then you have a little bit of practice, you'll be so shocked how much you notice this stuff everywhere and how easy it is. So this is a great example of how we take one of those building blocks of emotional intelligence and how we develop those skills of influence to be able to use our self-awareness to understand what our preference is, to use our social awareness to be able to pick up in others what their preference is, and then use our influence, our leadership skills, our adaptability skills to change our behavior or perhaps change our language and behavior patterns in this instance to be able to influence and get the best out of others. So I know we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and hope that all makes sense to you. And we've now got a couple of minutes for questions.
All right. Okay. So, Lisa, there was a reason why we're looking forward for this event, and now I think it's more obvious to everybody. And thank you so much for this great presentation and for your amazing insights. So, please, everybody, feel free to share your questions. We're running a bit out of time, but we're going to have the chance to answer some of them. So, please feel free to share in the chat box any kind of question. Just before to move to any question, Lisa, just some takeaways from my side. You know, it's quite clear, you know, that all of these power skills are directly connected with performance, engagement, commitment, motivation. And I would say that it's not a privilege of some, it's a must-have of the leaders and of the top performers, right? And my key takeaway is part of your presentation that says that emotional intelligence is not within the boundaries of a good professional. It's part of the fulfilled and happy life, right? So emotional intelligence is not about only being a good project manager, right? So I think it's a skill for everybody, and we should understand that this power or soft skills, these have huge impact, right? So that's my takeaways, and honestly, really thank you for sharing with us. So any questions? Let me, let also check. Any kind of questions?
I was just going to say, I should apologise. I know I've put far too much information in a short space of time, but I'm hoping you can go away and look at all the slides in more detail later. So apologies if I've given you blah, blah, blah too much.
No worries. Thank you so much. So I'm just picking some. Apologies for, I'm just picking randomly. So so there's a question that says, how do you work with toxic leaders? What if, if there's a toxic leader, and I understand that you described how can influence people, and let's say that our leader or the guy that is the manager of a division is not on the same page with his notions. So how do you deal with this situation?
So we can only ever what we say is the person with the most flexibility has the biggest impact on the outcome. So what we sometimes do is we expect the other person to change, when actually we can't. We can influence such a tiny little bit of another person, but what we have the most influence over is ourselves. What I would say, what I do so much coaching, and that comes up all of the time. Most of the time you can't do anything about that person. If they don't have the self-awareness to recognize it in themselves, there's very little you can do. But what is really important is that second building block, that's self-management. That's the ability to not let yourself get stressed, not let yourself get wound up, not get upset. It's your ability to manage your emotions when you are dealing with difficult people is critical. Then on the latter end, that relationship management, we've got something there about conflict management. That's about the best way to communicate with difficult people. And interestingly, these language and behavior patterns often are really successful in helping you to work with and communicate and influence those people, because these are only 2 patterns, there's 12. Some of the patterns you will recognize in what we often call toxic managers. And so it's about how we mirror not mirror their values, but how we mirror some of their preferences in order to get on the same page with them. Once we get on the same page, that's when we can begin to influence.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you everybody for attending this event. Really proud to have Lisa here, and very proud to host this kind of event. We're gonna work on this topic. We're gonna keep you, updated with all these key notions and all these notions around emotional intelligence. So thank you for joining us today, and more than happy to see you in our next event. Thank you so much. Bye. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. Oh, and I should say, if you want to send me the questions, because I can't see them, I'm more than happy to answer them and then post them out to your community. But I'm sorry, I can't see any of them. So
yeah, feel free, everybody. Feel free to share your questions, and we will forward to Lisa, and we'll get back to you with the feedback. All right.
great.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.